On a gray, overcast day in late June over 500 years ago, a young man and an old woman walked out together from their thatched-roofed bohío hut and moved toward the southwest corner of a rectangular ceremonial plaza near the center of their village. The borders of the place were lined with majestic standing boulders that their ancestors had erected along the length of the field's edges. Some of the standing boulders were inscribed with drawings that presented deities and sacred animals. They gazed north across the large oblong field for a little while. Then the young man looked up at the elder and he said, "Bibi, grandmother, when the cacique chief raised his staff yesterday at the solstice ceremony, he mentioned how holy this place is. What makes this place so holy? What is so special about this field?" The old woman looked over at the inquisitive face of her grandson and responded, "My boy, this is the center of the world, the Opias. The souls of our ancestors reside in this powerful place. Distant forebears are buried beneath these ceremonial fields, ancient ones who date back to the time of legends, the dream time." And indeed, the ancient ghosts still inhabit that place. The primordial ancestors of the Taino, a group of people who immigrated into the Caribbean islands from South America, that the modern-day scholars call Saladoids, had maintained a tradition of burying their dead under the central plaza of their villages thousands of years earlier. Now those ancient ancestors still rested beneath the soil of those same plazas long after the latter-day Taínos had discontinued the old habit of burying their deceased relatives there. The old woman and the young man now belonged to a new tradition. They no longer interred their dead underneath the soil of the central ceremonial plazas. They now buried them in caves and under the houses in which they lived. Oftentimes they even dug up the bones and cleaned them, and even cremated them so they could keep the processed ashes in gourds that hung on cords from the ceilings of their bohío huts, or buried the skulls and bones in clay pots under the houses. So here in the ceremonial fields, there were only ancient heroes and heroines buried, protagonists of primordial legends. This was indeed, as the old woman had said, the center of the world. In the central highlands of the island of Boriquén, Puerto Rico, there is such a place. This was the site of a ceremonial village. It was a special place where the central plazas had become the stage for the primordial drama of creation itself. On summer solstice, the villagers would gather in the ritual space. The ground beneath the celebrants vibrated with the energy of the spirits of the ancient ones buried below. Deep down in the nurturing womb of Mother Earth, that terrestrial manifestation of the Taino matriarch deity called Atabey, the ancient dead joined in the celebrations, their specters rising invisibly, and sometimes not so invisibly, to the surface, to again participate with their descendants in the sacred dances and songs of the Areito. The old woman exclaimed, "Think of that ceremony yesterday, my son. Image it in your mind. It celebrates one of the most important stations of the sun's journey across the sky. It marks the time of the year when our supreme spirit of life rises to full maturity." The young man looked over at his grandmother again. He answered, "Bibi, that is our supreme spirit of life, Yokahu, the son of the cosmic matriarch Atabey." "Yes, boy, Yokahu has a life cycle, just like we do. Because like us, he is a living being." He is born at spring equinox. He rises to full maturity now at summer solstice. Then during the autumn season, he wanes and dies like the harvested plant. His soul descends to the depths of the earth, back to Atabey's underworld belly, At winter solstice, his spirit bonds with the divine womb to gestate there until it is ready to be born again at the next spring equinox. Then after that, he rises again to full maturity on the following summer solstice. The old woman and the young man stood there pondering these concepts and remembering the previous day's celebration. This sight was witness to many such seasonal manifestations. In this holy place, the people could allow themselves to be transported through the rhythm of their dance to the beginning time, the time of legends. The lyrics of their songs place these people of their own time within the framework inhabited by the people of the past, and the standing boulders lined up in neat rows along the edges of the dance crowd glowed with the essence of transdimensional and transgenerational interaction. The legends came alive, creation began anew, and was spread out before the dancers like a historical panorama on display for them to relive in the company of their dead, as they all danced together, bridging the chasm of time. The legends spoke of a primordial mother, a cosmic female deity called Atabey, whose womb was the source of all. Her magic was the spinning energy of the creative vortex. The cosmic woman speaks the words of gestating and of generating.
I will myself pregnant, and from my womb I give birth to life itself.
Atabey's divine body became the vehicle for the act of original creation. The magic of making grew in her belly. She became great with child. In the mind of the youth, the images of many statuettes of pregnant goddesses that he had seen during his lifetime floated into consciousness. Then the old woman spoke again. Look into the dream time, my son. See the original All-Mother appeal to the magic of the female frog, the mother of the 1,000 eggs, the mother of the 10,000 eggs. She adopts the position of fertility as the frog woman. And indeed, the boy saw Atabey manifested as the frog mother. Inside her pregnant belly, her twin sons, Yokahu and Guacar, developed. That is the cosmic womb, the primordial beginning place of all. It is the place where the cyclic rounds of creation cause sacred beginnings to occur. When the three-point semi statue of Yokahu, the Lord of Life, is tied by the spiritual guide, the Behike, to the pear-shaped stone hoop that mirrors the form of a human uterus, in doing so, the Behike manifests the attachment of a fetus to the wall of a womb and therefore activates the magic of gestation. The child of this birth is Yokahu, the Lord of Life, Lord of Energy. The woman continued, when Atabey gives birth to the male spirit, the stage is set for the divine copulation. Creation now will begin as a result of the collaborative action of Atabey, the female force of the universe, and Yokahu, the male force of the universe. The young man now envisions the icons of generative opposites. The elongated oval with the central crease that marks the eyes and mouth of the female effigy represents the fertile female. The centrally dotted circle that appears at the end of the male iconography represents the inseminating male. Together, they manifest the creative union of male and female. cosmic union of the male and the female caused the matriarch's belly to swell again. And again she adopts the birthing position of the frog mother. From the sacred cave Iguanaboina are born the two great celestial lights. From the depths of the cave, Gwe, the sun, and Karaya, the moon. The surface of the earth becomes the avatar for Atabe's body, and the cave is the manifestation of the opening into her womb. The sun is the power source and illuminator. The moon is the manifestation of cyclic creativity encapsulated in her monthly 28-day cycle. And then, from the womb of the matriarch, emerge the stars in the form of 4 stones. The stars take their place in the sky, north, south, east, and west. These form the basic pattern that will evolve into the sacred cosmogram of the universe. They spin around Yokahu, and he becomes the heavenly cacique chief, the model of all subsequent chiefs around whom the community rotates. Atabe asks her son to model the fermenting mists and dust of the empty cosmos into the form of the heavenly tree, which will then grow at the center of the divine cosmogram. The divine cosmogram is the image of the 3-tiered spiritual cosmos. It has the heavenly dome above, an earthly plane in between, and a watery underworld below. And at the center of it all, the great cosmic Seba tree, uniting the 3 realms. To the ritual dancers, the pattern of the creation narrative presented that imagery of the cosmic geography, the mythic cosmogram. This mythic cosmogram enveloped their entire lives in a 3-level dream reality composed of an earth plane called Ku or Ke that lies at the center, and which is the surface upon which the living walk and thrive. Above the earth plane hangs the sky dome called Ture. Across the celestial dome, the sun spirit, Gwe, marks his daily trek from east to west. The sun's trek is the main indicator of the changing seasons. It is the yearly patterns of the sun's heavenly journeys that allow the people to know where in the annual cycle they happen to be on any given day. Below the earth plane lies the shamanic underworld, the warm, moist, nurturing uterine realm of the ancestral spirits, a place called Kwaibai. Those 2 realms of non-ordinary reality, above and below the earth plane, are the 2 spiritual places where the Boitiu, the shaman, journeys during his or her ecstatic travels. All 3 planes are connected by the central tree that acts as the conduit via which the Boitiu journeys down to the realm of the souls, the departed ancestors, the place where the deceased also dance, mirroring the actions of their living relatives above. The old woman spoke again. Close your eyes, my son, and allow the presence of the concentric circles fill your mind. The young man closed his eyes. His mind was filled with the enormity of cosmic conception in Atabe's womb, the centrally dotted circle that exists at the very center of reality, surrounded by the two crescent curves that represent duality, the phallic center inside the vaginal circumference. He had seen this imagery before. It was emblazoned upon the two matched mammiform lobes of the clay wedding vessel. The two female breast-shaped protuberances, arranged on either side of the male projection, modeled on top of the wedding vessel, each one presented the viewer with a circular areola and nipple that actually bore that symbol upon it, the symbol of the centrally dotted circle surrounded by the two matched crescents. The young man opened his eyes just in time to focus on the image of the drawing carved on the principal boulder of the great plaza. It was the image of the cosmic matriarch herself in the frog position. She stood there before him, squatting and ready to give birth. He stared at her pregnant belly. It bore the image of the centrally dotted circle. It displayed the very symbol of life. It was life glowing within the pregnant belly. The centrally dotted circle grew in intensity and became the overwhelming image of the cosmic center. Allow yourself to fall into the wisdom, my son, the old lady continued. It is the opening into the heart of the truth itself. The matriarch's navel is the navel of the whole universe manifested before you right here on earth. And then the young man stood before the core of truth. The centrally dotted circle manifested there at the very heart of the ceremonial center. It was the sacred cosmogram marked within the circle of standing stones. The circle of stones lay surrounded by other plazas. All those other plazas were quadrangular, reflecting the four corners of the cosmos. All of them were rectangles, but at the very center lay the magic hoop, the opening to the eternal conduit, the central axis through which the cosmic tree grows. The young man saw the large flat boulder sitting at the center of the circle, the central dot. He stared at the central dot, and it opened up a great conduit that connects the earth plane with the sky dome of Ture and the underworld of Kwaibai. He looked into the abyss at the center of creation and allowed himself to fall into it, to travel through it. He could still hear his grandmother's voice as he dropped into its depths. Look into the future, my son. This great round altar will be here long after we're gone. Our descendants shall visit this place and look into this same conduit, and they also shall travel through it just like you. They shall dance around it, celebrate the vitality of existence. The present shall be the past, and the past shall be the future. The centrally dotted circle is the navel of the earth, my son. It is the conduit at the very center of everything, Standing here looking at it from the south, we see it reflected in the night sky. The young man looked up and saw the North Star shining in the sky. In the horizon beneath it, the great mythological mountain rose up into the atmosphere from among the forested hills, silhouetted in front of the star-studded firmament. It represented Kanta, the legendary central mountain that bore upon its side the primordial cave from which all humanity had emerged at the beginning of the Dream Age. Kasivahagwa. Look carefully, my son, look carefully, the old lady continued. The sacred mountain, Kanta, is the counterpart of the central tree. The mountain is the tree, and the tree is the mountain. They're both manifestations of the central conduit via which the shaman journeys. It is a living entity, this mountain. It is a deity, a Sami. We call it the mountain Sami. The mountain Sami rises in the middle, and all else rotates around it, just like the cosmic Seba tree also rises in the middle, and everything else rotates around it. The young man admired the beauty of the mountain standing against the luminescent night background. Then he saw the movement of the stars, turning, spinning, rotating in the sky. The stars were dancing in the sky, just like the people dance here on earth. The stars were dancing, spinning around the North Star. The North Star was the central dot in the middle of the celestial circle. There was a centrally dotted circle up there in the heavens that reflected the one here at the center of the ceremonial site. It was the navel of the sky. The young man continued to travel through the hollow conduit. He saw the stars leaving luminescent streaks as they turned around in the sky, making a celestial, centrally dotted circle. Then his grandmother's voice pierced the darkness again. Now you will see the unity of this reality, my son. It is the frothy, fermenting staff that rises along the center of all that is. It is the flow of energy that rises and ebbs, up and down and up, from the heart of the sky to the heart of the earth and beyond. This staff is the image of the Milky Way galaxy. It is the flowing river, but it is also a tree trunk. It is the trunk of the central cosmic Seba tree, with its branches in the sky, its trunk passing through the navel of the earth, and its roots deep down in the flooded underworld. The youth tasted the fermentation of the frothy tree trunk along which he was passing at that moment. He reveled in the inebriation and continued allowing himself to travel through its long channel. As he traveled, he learned. As he traveled, he gained wisdom. He pondered duality, the contrasting yet complementary opposite. Up versus down, dry versus wet, light versus dark, and right versus wrong. The sky also has its duality. The stars spinning above the circular ceremonial plaza manifested the legitimate center of the cosmos, and yet he knew that in a different context, this same imagery represented an illegitimate cosmic center. He remembered the legend of Anakakuya and Guahayona. In that legend, Chief Guahayona had stolen away out of the primordial cave Kasibahagwa. He had absconded with all the women, leaving the cave community in a state of profound imbalance. He only recognized his great sin when he came to the realization that, in his absence, an illegitimate tyrant had taken his place upon the chief's duho stool in the cave. The new illegitimate Cacique chief, called Anakakuya, came after Guahayona and the women in an attempt to bring them all back. He wanted to prove that he could fix the problem Guahayona had created. These two men possessed two different forms of leadership magic. Guahayona possessed the true magic of the Cacique. It was bestowed on him by the power of the Milky Way galaxy, the true center of our cosmos, around which all other stars and planets truly revolve. It was this link with that legitimate manifestation of the cosmic center that gave him the right to sit on the chief's duho at the center of the community. But Anakakuya was a deceiver. He manifested the power of another kind of center. In fact, his name is Flower of the Center, and he manifests the magic of the North Star. Seen from aboard a canoe on the surface of the ocean, the conflict between Guahayona and the Anakakuya becomes very dramatic as it plays out in the night sky. Guahayona tricked his rival to come fishing with him in a canoe. While they were aboard the craft, Guahayona pointed down into the depths of the ocean and cried out, "Look at that beautiful seashell." When Anakakuya leaned over the gunwale to stare into the depths, Guahayona grabbed him violently by his legs and tossed him into the water. Anakakuya drowned, leaving the Cacique Duho's stool to be reoccupied by Guahayona. This drama is played out in the night sky. The Big Dipper constellation that represents Anakakuya also represents the entire complex of heavenly bodies that includes the North Star. So, as the sky spins around the North Star, the Big Dipper dances there in the center, and the rest of the sky dances around it. This is Anakakuya dancing the dance of the chief, and the whole sky dancing around him, honoring him. But when he dances above the ocean, his dance is not the dance of a true chief. It is the dance of an illegitimate usurper. The spinning action around him over the ocean is actually a fake manifestation. It is an optical illusion because, in fact, the sky is not really dancing at all. It is the earth that is spinning, making the sky appear to spin. When seen from a canoe on the ocean, the ancients saw this as a dance of defeat. As the Big Dipper turns in the sky on a specific date of the year, it eventually dips below the marine horizon. This fall of the Big Dipper into the marine horizon is a manifestation of the Taino myth in which Guahayona tosses his rival into the ocean. So when the spinning sky is seen from a canoe, it represents an illegitimate chief deposed by a legitimate one. This is a negative manifestation of the Big Dipper. When the same celestial spin is seen over land, it means something different. On land, it all comes together to manifest cyclical balance in the cosmic journey. Over land, it is a legitimate cosmic center. The great Ceiba tree rises majestically, uniting the three universal levels. The sacred mountain stands there as a counterpart for that tree. Upon the earth, the stone at the center of the circular plaza marks the place where the tree passes through the surface of the earth. Beneath the ground, the ancestors rest among the roots of the tree in the flooded underworld. And overhead, the spin of the heavens around the North Star reflect the vortex of the earthly circular plaza. The North Star, an illegitimate cosmic center over the ocean, and a legitimate one over land. In the background, the Milky Way galaxy does double duty. It can be interpreted as the trunk of the great Ceiba tree. But as the young man falls through the center of the tree, he eventually splashes into the cool waters of the cosmic river. This is also the Milky Way galaxy. The flow of the cosmic river, that is the Milky Way galaxy, is another way in which the realm above is connected to the realm below. The young man still hears the voice of his grandmother guiding him as he floats gently in the frothy waters of the galactic stream. He is carried over the dome of the heavens. Later, the river transports him into the underworld realm of the dead, where Lord Yokahu travels every year at winter solstice. The river turns into a subterranean stream. The youth drifts among the ghosts of deceased relatives, long dead great grandparents, uncles who were killed in war, cousins who died in childbirth, aunts who had held important positions in the council of the clan mothers. In the realm of the underworld, the great clay vessels hold the remains of the dead. Wooden urns contain the bones of the deceased, and the souls of the ancestors welcome the temporary visitor. It is a wondrous journey through cavernous hollows and breathtaking sinkholes. And down there, the dead celebrate ceremonies, dance to songs, and enjoy sweet guava fruit, just like their living counterparts on the surface of the earth. The youth floats calmly, allowing himself to drift, still carried along by the flow of the underground stream. After traveling through the realm of the ancestors, he's finally ready to come back up. He surfaces in the east just as Gwei, the sun spirit, does every morning after his nightly sojourn in the underworld realm of Koibai. The youth arrives back at the center of the universe. He stands there next to his grandmother, and she again speaks to him. Son, the divine cosmogram is bounded by the reality of the four directions. This reality manifests itself to us through the sacred narrative of Deminan Karakarakol. He is one of the four legendary quadruplets brothers born of a woman, Itibakaubaba. Each one of those four youths represents one of the four directions: north, south, east, and west. Their story is a story that begins with mischief and disrespect to elders, but later, through the ministrations of a wise elder called Bayamanako, the four brothers are redeemed. They discover the secret of compassion as it materializes literally out of the back of the eldest quadruplet, Deminan himself. Compassion manifests in the form of Kawama, the ancestral female turtle who sprang out of Deminan's back. She eventually transforms into the primordial human mother. Deminan, for his part, is merged with his three brothers, who in fact have always been the disparate, abnormally disconnected, split personalities of one very confused person. Now they're all merged into one man, as it should be. Deminan is a whole man now. Now, in his reconstituted soul, is contained the magical power of the four direction that he and his brothers have always represented. The south, the west, the north, and the east. Later, when he joins Turtle Woman in marriage, they become the primordial ancestors of our nation, father and mother. The young man pondered the message of the ancient legend. The sacred quadruplets indicate more than just four mischievous youths who are taught a lesson by an old man. They are personifications of the four values that are associated with the four directions. Ultimately, he realized how important it was that Deminan was assigned the direction of the north, the realm of experience of wisdom. Deminan learns through the agonizing lesson of having a turtle be born out of his back that mischief has consequences. As he is reduced to a writhing ball of pain, when Elder Bayayamanako causes a huge turtle to erupt from his back? We are reminded that learning through experience is often painful. Again, the grandmother spoke. My son, fix your gaze one more time on the future. Our descendants shall create altars that will hold power. Those altars will recognize the four directions as important elements of how we interact with the great divine. Image their altars, my son. The four sacred birds of the directions stand dramatically around the magical mountain Sami that represents the central conduit, just like the cosmic tree. Their altars shall mirror the imagery of this circle plaza in which we are now standing. The wisdom of these four directions will always hold a very important place in the tradition of our people. Every one of those altars will be a tiny circle plaza, and when they form altars, each altar will be a legacy of this place right here. The boy looked around him at the magical circle, the standing stones forming the circumference of the sacred space, encircling both him and his grandmother. He looked up at the silhouette of the mountain Sami to the north. He looked toward the east, where way the sun would rise in the morning. Yesterday the sun rose from behind that hill over there, the old woman continued. That is the same hill from behind which the sun rises every summer solstice morning. Only on that one day out of the whole year does the sun rise from behind that hill. Note the shadow cast by that skinny stone just as the sun rises. The cacique chief stood over here to the west and watched as the solar orb emerged from the eastern horizon. And when it did, that tall, thin stone on the eastern edge of the circle Do you see it? That tall, thin stone cast a shadow for a fleeting instant just as the sun emerged. The shadow pointed right at the central boulder. That was a signal. That was a sign. On the morning of the summer solstice, and only on that morning, does that tall stone cast such a shadow. That points to the central rock. The reason the sun casts this special shadow on only this special morning, summer solstice, is because the sun marks a cycle in the sky during the course of the year. Every morning, Gwei, the sun spirit, rises in the east, but on each day it actually rises from a slightly different place on the eastern horizon. As the cacique chief, who has the responsibility to observe these cycles, notices, the sun's arching trek from east to west over the dome of the sky shifts ever so slightly each day. On winter solstice, the arch leans far to the south. On that day, the daylight is at its shortest, and the night is the longest. The soul of the dead Lord Yokahu reaches the underworld womb of Atabe on that day and becomes reconceived. Then, over a period of days after the winter solstice, the arching trek of the sun moves further to the north on each subsequent day. It rises from behind a different hill or tree each morning, creeping further and further north throughout the long dry season of late winter. On each day, the daytime is longer and the nighttime is shorter. Finally, it reaches a point on its trek where the daylight period and the nighttime period are exactly the same length. That day is spring equinox. The divine male spirit Yokahu is born on that day. After spring equinox, the arch that the sun marks across the sky from east to west continues to creep northward. Eventually, it reaches a day when the sun actually passes right above our heads and crosses the point at the very center of the sky. That day is called Zenith Passage. The old woman took a pause at that moment to collect her thoughts. Then she continued. After Zenith Passage, the arch of the sun's trek keeps moving beyond the zenith and further north until finally it reaches the extreme point of its journey. On that day, the arch of the sun's trek across the sky from east to west is at its northernmost point. And on that day, the daytime is the longest and the nighttime is the shortest. At that moment, the young man turned to face his grandmother and said, "Summer solstice." "Exactly," she answered. "Summer solstice. On the morning of the summer solstice, the sun rises over there from behind that particular hill, and it makes that tall, skinny rock cast that special shadow that points straight at the central boulder here in the middle of the circle of standing stones. This is the climax of the solar cycle, the life cycle of our Lord of Life. Do you know why Yokahu has that name?" The young man thought for a moment, then he answered, "Soul of the yucca plant." "Yes," the old woman responded. Yokahu is a plant spirit, the spirit of the yucca plant. But he is also a sun spirit, a sky spirit, a life spirit, a spirit of energy and power, a spirit that personifies human and animal and plant life. His name, Yokahu Bawa Maorokoti, Yokahu spirit that lords over the ocean waves. Like any living being, Yokahu has a life cycle. He's born, he rises to maturity, then he wanes and finally dies. In his dead or dormant manifestation, he is imaged as a lifeless being, decapitated, with his head between his arms, his ribs and vertebrae showing. But in death, he becomes a hero, because it is as the harvested plant that the yucca soul manifests its ultimate destiny. The farmer pulls the yucca root out of the ground so they can be processed and prepared by the women. That is how the yucca plant becomes an integral part of who we are. We eat the yucca plant and it becomes integrated in our bodies. Our women make the cassava bread from the yucca plant and it feeds us. The yucca becomes us. Yucca is us. We are Yokahu. He lives in us. We live in him. He is the yucca plant, and so are we. The sun is the supreme source of energy on the surface of the earth. His energy flows down to us all from the sky and is used by us living things here on earth to keep up the business of living. He's so important that our holy people decorate the walls of the sacred caves with images of his face. But we humans do not have the capacity to directly derive energy from the sun. We must get it from an intermediary. That intermediary is green plants. The plant people stand out there bathed in the rays of the sun, in the cultivated fields, and open their welcoming green hands, their leaves, to access the flow of energy that descends from the bright face of Gwei, the sun spirit. And what an amazing magical process that is. The plant people have the capacity of accessing the radiant energy of the sun and drawing it into their tissues through their leaves. Once the solar energy is inside them, it flows down their stems and into their roots. The yucca plant stores all of that solar power underground in its big tuberous roots. And in that way, the essence of the sun itself becomes the resident of the underworld realm. The sun actually lives down there in the starchy substance of that root, ready to be consumed by us. Then the old woman looked up at the night sky. She saw the stars. She saw the round ceremonial plaza laid out in front of her. She dreamed of her children and of her children's children. She dreamed of their generations. She looked into the future. She smiled. The legacy of the summer solstice ceremony lived on beyond her. The ravages of time, foreign conquest, and colonial slavery tried to erase the memory of that inheritance, but it survived the centuries nonetheless. Her descendants now honor her memory in ceremony and ritual, just like she honored her own ancestors in ceremony and ritual. The Tainos of this era also celebrate the summer solstice. The circular stone altars composed of little pebbles arranged in a sacred hoop are the legacy of the ancestral ceremonial circular plaza. We also honor the gifts of the four directions that are the legacy of Deminan and his three brothers. We also recognize that through the center of our circular altars, the sacred central ceiba tree rises with its roots in the underworld and its branches in the sky. We perform rituals inspired directly by the ancestors themselves in dreams and visions. In these rituals, a man adopts the identity of Yokahu, the spirit of yucca, and of the solar presence in that yucca root. That man becomes Yokahu, and he becomes the sun. The ceremony dramatizes the ability of humans to overcome the challenges of life. In this drama, the challenges of life are symbolized by the shark spirit, Kahaya, who is the totem creature of Wakar himself, the Lord of Challenge. The presence of shark imagery in ancient Taino iconography has survived since the era of the old woman and her grandson, all the way down to our present time in the form of shark-shaped pendants and shark-tooth necklaces. As part of the solstice ceremony, the man who is performing the role of Yokahu takes up a bow and arrow and performs a dance with the Behike, the spiritual leader of the ceremony. The Behike brandishes an effigy of a shark crafted from wild vegetation and a manaya hatchet that is a symbol of challenge and transformation. The Behike also wears a seashell mask, a guaisa, that harks back to the ancient seashell masks worn by ancient Behikes during the time of the old lady and her grandson. This is indeed a dance of challenge. It is the shark dance. The two antagonists move around each other threateningly. They move to the rhythm of the drum. Tainoti bomatum, wakia baba tureito, tainoti bomatum, wakia baba tureito, yoka baba barakoti, wakia baba tureito, yoka baba barakoti, wakia baba tureito, tainoti bomatum, wakia baba tureito, tainoti bomatum, wakia baba tureito, bagua taka, babai taka, kuto katureito. Paguataka, wabaitaka, kuto, katureito, kainoti, bomatum, okia babatureito, kainoti, bomatum, okia babatureito. Wariko wakia, musika wakia, para you could be a you, kataino. Wariko wakia, musika wakia, para you could be a you, kataino. Kainoti, bomatum, okia babatureito, kainoti, bomatum. Okia babatureito, kainoti bomatum. Okia babatureito, kainoti bomatum. Okia babatureito, Finally, the Behike sets the shark effigy down on the ground. Then, the man that is performing the role of Yokahu approaches the effigy. He shoots an arrow into it. This act symbolizes his ability to overcome challenge and emerge triumphant. The triumph of Yokahu during summer solstice is the triumph of all humans. Yokahu is the essence of human life, and so his victory is our victory. The summer solstice is the time when the journey of the sun's arch towards the north comes to an end. It is the moment when the sun ceases to travel. This moment is where the sun stops. Where the sun stops. It stops, but it does not end. The solar cycle will again endure another death at harvest, and Yokahu will again travel to the underworld realm of Kwaibai. But his triumph will be repeated there also, when he again defeats the Lord of Challenge at winter solstice, and eventually emerge victorious at his springtime rebirth. It is the magic of the sacred cycles. It is the law of nature. The place where the sun stops is not the place where the sun ceases. It never will be.